Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the Turbo V6 YouTube channel. In this episode, we're going to be 3D printing some body panels. It's my first time ever doing it, so hopefully it turns out good. So ever since I picked up the Firebird, I knew I wanted to turbocharge it, and once I figured out the turbo location, I had a really cool idea, and I'm trying to execute it in this video. So what am I talking about? This turbo location. Obviously, nice low front mount location for the turbo. It's perfect for feeding fresh air. So if you see in the truck, the turbo location right there, I made a core support so I could pull the headlight out, put a nice velocity stack in so I get nice cool fresh air to the turbo. Well, with the Firebird, I knew I wanted to do the same thing, but this time integrate it with the bodywork. The idea is that I'm going to have a hole here, and I'm going to feed the turbo inlet with fresh air straight from the front of the car. And now I thought about doing something where I, had an aluminum piece that I could, mount and whatnot, but I really thought like, oh, well, I'll just buy another license plate blank off plate, cut a hole in this and like mold something so it was like a nice velocity stack. Well, these are actually not as cheap as I was really thinking that they would be. So I decided that I'm going to make it from scratch. And I found a cheap free trial for a iPhone that you can basically photogrammetry, basically take a ton of pictures of this all the way around. So the whole idea behind the dry shampoo was to stop reflections and get a nice matte finish so that whenever you're taking pictures, it can actually capture the surface profile of the whole thing. And I basically took that, imported it into Fusion 360, and modeled it up. So I did a quick test sample out of some white plastic just to make sure that it was pretty close. Now this is PLA. It's not the correct plastic to really use for this because in the sun it'll wind up warping. I wound up putting that into the front bumper and it looks like it matches up pretty good. Obviously you can see here I added to the model a nice velocity stack. This is obviously 1/4 of it because my 3D printer is only like prints like 6x6, so couldn't print the whole thing at once, so I had to print in sections. So there are all the sections, and this is actually out of ABS, so this should be able to be nicely sanded. I'm going to wind up epoxying it together, and then we'll see what this thing looks like. All right, so there's the comparison. This is obviously not glued together yet, so it's not set up perfectly, but yeah, that's pretty much what I'm going for. And I'll want to have this removable so I can swap back to the blank off plate for street driving. Now it's time to sand this thing up, try and get it a little bit smoother, and then we're going to try and epoxy it together. All right, so I'm making some progress. Sanded up all the pieces. This one actually wound up having a crack in the layers, so I'm just epoxying that together. And then I'm also starting to just epoxy two of these pieces, these top two pieces together, and then I'm gonna have to let these cure. It says it's 15 minutes, but it's pretty cold in the garage right now, so it's probably just going to leave it for a few hours. And then I might come back out later tonight and glue the two bottom pieces together. And then, yeah, we'll just kind of glue all these pieces together and wind up seeing how it fits in the bumper. So yeah, the ABS is sanding up very nicely. I was kind of surprised at how nice it's sanding up. First time I really ever tried to body work something off of the 3D printer. So it's going pretty good so far. Just setting it in the bumper, they seem to fit okay, but I really won't know until they're all glued together. And then we'll come back at a later time and, you know, use some flexible Bondo and get that nice and smooth. And then we'll hopefully be able to somewhat color match it. And yeah, we'll see how that turns out, but that'll be, you know, a few months away. And we'll just do all the body work at the same time. Got to paint the, you know, the front end, all the tube work that I did so far as well. So we'll come back later at a later time and do that. But now I just want to get this thing kind of mocked up, make sure it's going to work, and then I can move on to the next thing, which is probably going to wind up being some pieces that I machined last winter, actually, and fit those up and continue to try and get this thing ready to start up. Okay, well, I got this thing epoxied together. It's turning out pretty good. You can see there, got a 4-inch hole in the middle. I was using this 2-part GB weld epoxy. It's actually kind of flexible even after it fully cures, so that should hopefully help it from not cracking from vibration and whatnot. Just did it a little bit overboard, so I'm going to try and sand it back. Hopefully it sands pretty decent. I really just need to apply some more epoxy on the back just because I couldn't get it all at once. So I'm going to scuff up the back, finish epoxying that, and then I might sand it down a little bit, and then we'll you know, make sure the fit's pretty good and go from there. All right, well, I got everything sanded up. It actually, the epoxy sanded really nicely, so would definitely recommend that. I'll put a link to that in the description. I got that off Amazon. It was pretty cheap for what I needed, and yeah, I think the rest really will come whenever I start body working the outside of this. I'm not really going to worry about the backside. I really just wanted to sand the back. I didn't really sand it before I glued it before, so I wanted to give it a nice scuff and then bond on the backside so that, you know, there's not a whole lot of epoxy on the front side. It's really just in the gap. So I wanted to put a little bit of excess on the backside. And yeah, it turned out really nice. I did wait for like a few days before I wound up sanding this. I sanded it with 80 grit on the DA sander, and yeah, it turned out awesome. And also this is ABS, 3D printed ABS. It's eSun, currently out of stock, so I'll put the link in the description, but hopefully it'll come back in stock again if you're interested in doing the same thing. Didn't get a great idea exactly how it's going to fit up, but now that it's fully bonded, I'll be able to get it in there, see if I need to sand anything to make it, you know, fit up pretty good. But just comparing it with the factory license plate delete, it looks really, really close. So I think the idea is going to work out, and yeah, pretty nice for a custom body piece that you could 3D print. No crazy fiberglass work. I've never worked with fiberglass, so I was worried about trying to make a mold or something like that. Whereas this, it's just like, hey, 3D print it pretty close, epoxy it, and then bodywork's the only thing that's left. So we'll come back once this is fully cured up and take a look at what it, you know, how it fits and how good it looks. All right, so while this epoxy has been curing up, I thought I would work on one of the other things that I picked up. So I picked up this Turbo Works oil scavenge pump. Obviously, I'm going to need something to kind of get the oil out of the turbo back into the engine just because of how low I have it mounted. So I picked up this little, oil scavenge pump a few weeks ago, and I'm now finally trying to figure out where I want to get it mounted. I don't know if it actually requires a specific location, but I think I'm going to wind up putting it over here. And I want the level of this roughly about like where the mount is, so that oil doesn't just pool and go into the seals and, burn through the exhaust or even potentially leak out into the compressor side through the seals. So that's why I picked this thing up, and I'm going to try and mount it over here. I've been working on a little cardboard bracket to mount it over here to these tubes. So yeah, let me show you my little CAD template, cardboard aided design I have worked up. And this is going to mount right here to these tubes. And I need to go grab some metal so I can actually make this thing. And got some nut certs mocked up. And yeah, that should be nice and sturdy. This thing is actually kind of heavy. And, it's just going to be dangling. So I wanted to mount it pretty securely. But it looks like this thing is curing up pretty good. I wound up letting it get a little bit harder and then trying to smooth things over because it actually has a decent working time. So I was able to just kind of like make sure it wasn't leaving any voids in between the gaps that I had. So yeah, it's coming along pretty nice. It's cold in the garage, so it's taking a little longer to cure. But no rush on that because, I don't need that to get the engine running. All right, so I picked up some 1 1/4 by 1 1/4 11 gauge. I'm actually going to be able to make this out of 3 pieces. I'm just going to kind of miter the corners. So I'm going to have a piece going up, across, and down. So yeah, I think it'll be strong enough, and an 11 gauge is probably overkill, but that's what they had. I didn't feel like going anywhere else to grab metal. So yeah, let's get this marked up, start cutting pieces out and prepping them to weld. Okay, well, that was a significant amount of work. I probably am going to cut the time lapse much shorter than what it took me in reality, but turned out all right. I really wish I would have, been able to do this out of like flat material, like do really nice like bends and whatnot, but whatever. It looks fine on the outside, and the inside it's a little bit rough, but it doesn't really matter that much. You can't really see. And once all this front end stuff is on, you'll never be able to see it, but it fits really nice around the tubes. And now I pretty much just have to weld it in place, and then I'm gonna use riv nuts. I also took a second to toss in the license plate filler panel. It's not a perfect fit, but it's it looks pretty good. Just have to, I think, do some sanding, and then I'm gonna also have to drill the mounting screw holes. But yeah, it's looking pretty decent. Lines up fairly nice with the body. It's not perfect, but then again, this is a 2000 Firebird. The body panels were not perfect to begin with, so I think it's pretty comparable to the factory license plate filler, and now I have a big hole for the inlet for the turbo. But that's pretty much a wrap for this video. This is a lot of work, and can't spend every day out here, so I just try and get as much work done as I can when I do have the free time. And yeah, just slowly trugging along progress on the Firebird. really the goal, I think, with hopefully some time off that I have, I will hopefully get this thing fired up by end of January. So that is the goal, and it probably will not be permanent. Nothing will be complete, but yeah, it should fire up. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later.